Well, good morning, everyone. Here we are at another Friday, and today we're going to tackle something that's really of importance to those of us who live here in California, and that is how is the legislature and what they're doing and what they're enacting affecting those of us who are small businessmen. And Ron's taken some data here, and he'll present it to us, and hopefully it'll engage us in a conversation as to what's happening. But more importantly, is there anything that we can do to mitigate against some of the things coming out that are affecting small business? So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Ron. Ron,
Okay, thank
give
you,
us some
Ray.
insights.
Thank you. Yeah, we did have a discussion, kind of kicked this off last time, so I'm going to for those who haven't seen that, we'll just kind of take a look at the legislative landscape this year. This information is put together by CMTA, that's California Manufacturers Trade Association, I believe. They basically are work. At the legislature on behalf of manufacturers to try and get them to think sensibly about bills. It's obviously self-serving for manufacturing. They did have some wins, but I think overall they feel as though there's been a huge loss on the legislative front this year for manufacturers.
Ron, is there any chance you can make that larger? It's pretty small on my screen. I don't know about yours, Ed.
Let's see. Is that any better right there?
No, it hasn't changed.
Really?
Now see that it covers the whole screen. That other thing only covers about a quarter of it.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. So a couple of quick things. The California Legislature introduced 2,600 bills, and they basically the final tally of the chaptered bills, meaning the ones that they got through, 330 Senate bills, 560 Assembly bills, and 156 were vetoed by the governor. So his veto is about 17%. About And so you can see there the rehash of what I just mentioned right here. About 40% of the Assembly bills didn't reach the floor. 26 didn't reach the Senate floor. Only one bill was refused passage by the Senate and the Assembly. The governor's veto rate was 14%, which is actually a little bit more than I was surprised it was that high, because it seems like Newsom is like, yeah, all the laws we can come up with, we want that to happen. So here were the things that we kind of talked about. These are the ones that have to do with manufacturing, and we'll just talk about the ones that were signed. The Climate Corporate Data Accountability Act was signed. We're going to talk about that today. Last week, we talked about paid sick days and accrual and how that is going to affect small business. That's an interesting show, and we just sent that out this morning. So you can go onto our Microgiants channel and you can find that and see that if you'd like right now. And then of course unemployment for striking workers got vetoed. So that was a sort of a win for manufacturers, because the unions have strike money that they use to pay those people. So this would be like a double payment. So it'd be like a reward for going on strike. Fortunately, that particular one didn't pass.
Huh.
But
You got to give our governor credit for that. That
yeah.
was a very good veto, in my opinion.
Yes, it definitely was. And so from that perspective, we thought we'd talk a little bit more specifically about this climate corporate data one. There are a pair of these bills that are affecting companies who that do business in California, not that are based in California. In other words, they're not. You could simply be shipping something to California, and that would be doing business in California. So that pretty much is going to take every company in the United States. So this is a little bit bigger deal than we talked about. One of the things that I was sort of interested in is, why in the world is it that the California legislature does so much to harm business in this state over the years? And so I thought I would Now, let's see, can you see that, or is this small too?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, so
Yeah.
one of the things I thought that was really pretty interesting, now I've done something so that I can't see it myself. Let's just see here what happened. Here we go. And so one of the things I think that was pretty interesting is if you take a look at Democrats in the Senate, there is not a single one that has been a businessman. Now, 6 of them, 21%, say they have some business in government. But based on what I know and have witnessed, that's very, very small amount of people have done anything material if they have been involved in government quite a bit. So they only have a little bit of business experience. Those people likely didn't have real business experience, meaning they were not CEOs of companies, they were not owners of companies. They just, maybe worked for somebody. In the assembly, it's a little bit better. 25% of the Democrats had had business experience. Not very. You can see these assembly members have been exclusively 73% exclusively in government / in nonprofits. In other words, we've got well over 70% of Democrats that have absolutely no idea what business is about and how you make a buck so that you can pay taxes. Contrast that to the Republicans. In the Republican Senate, 58% are business people, and another 25% have some business experience. And in the Assembly, 40%. So you can see that the Republicans have a very deep business background, so they know and understand. But the problem is, you take a look at the combined one down here. The problem here is out of all the legislators, 84 of them are Democrats and only 32 are Republicans. That gives them a supermajority, and that's why they can do anything they want in this state. So every time you ask yourself, why did they do that? They did that because they don't know what else to do. So, they have no idea about business. They probably think that money grows on trees, and the typical cliche. Okay. The typical cliche there is that business people are rich. There are those who think that they only care about themselves. That if you go into business, you're you're doing it for selfish reasons. I know that Ray, you've had thoughts like that, but in fact, we know after how many years of doing work with small business people, how true that really is. And there are only a few, out of working in dozens and dozens and dozens over 40 years. I can name the multimillionaires on one hand.
Yeah.
So the
No, I think to really contrast that in a positive way, Ron. As we've talked about before, business people who go into business, whether their politically leanings are left or right, usually do it because they want to be independent.
Yeah.
They don't want to. I don't want to work for the man. I spent 3 years in the military, and I said that's the end of that. And
Right.
since that time, I haven't really worked for a lot of other people.
Exactly right. You've been pretty much independent through this whole period of time.
Ron, I think your premise has got validity because I don't know how you can vote on issues and really support business if you don't have any business experience. It just kind of makes sense what you're saying.
Yeah, it does. It does. The challenge is that, why is the state so blue? Is it because the Republicans haven't come up with anything that's really meaningful to them? And I think that's a challenge that I see in terms of a political answer is, we do live in a state in which we have to.
Yeah.
I'm surprised there was 35% or so Republicans that have no business experience.
Yeah.
You combine the two, no matter which party it is,
Yeah.
There's a lot of people voting on stuff that have no business experience, whether they're Republicans
Yeah.
or Democrats.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
to
that's right.
me, that's a double whammy. How can you have any type of relevancy for small business if you don't understand what it does? And there's a big difference also between small business and large business.
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I'd love
Absolutely.
to see these numbers based upon wealth, because there's a lot of wealthy people and it really doesn't matter to them. They get a dividend check. They might think they run a business, but
Oh,
not really,
they're
right?
not really running a business. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
if it's like gold, if it's somebody that, and Democrats have wealthy members too in the legislature. I mean, there are a lot of Democrats that have a lot of money. Um, but and it would be interesting to know what the statistics are of those who grew up in a family with money, as opposed to those who make it
Yes,
themselves.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think
That
that'd
would
be
be
that'd be an
great.
interesting statistic,
that's
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
because I
So-
think those people who have, whether it's in California or elsewhere, I mean, that's a corporate welfare environment. People who never earned the money and just got it. I think one of the
Yeah.
things I've always liked about the Buffett, he always says, if you didn't earn the money, you really don't know how to make it.
Yeah.
And and it's kind of, he's
Very
been a
true.
real proponent of, I think with his kids, he's only giving them 10%. He says, they got to go out there and make it the old fashioned way.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I think that there are a few folks who do that. But by and large, I think people who make money, would like to pass it on, the business as well as the money, pass it on to their children. And we've talked a lot about that. We've done a lot of family programs, and there's something to be said for generational wealth,
Yeah.
and particularly in cases that are tough. I
Right.
mean, having generational wealth, say in California 10, 20 years ago, basically means that you could get your kids into houses early, help them out, and therefore they're not going to have to move away from California. Not having that wealth means a lot of them are not going to be able to stay.
Yeah,
I think Ray,
yeah.
you mentioned that. And so, there's a case where simply saying we want our kids to have the same kind of lifestyle that they grew up in. That's not exactly hoarding wealth. That's more like saying all we want to do is we just want to kind of maintain our existing lifestyle, and that may not even be lavish. But
Right.
but if you don't have some wealth today, based on the housing prices, and we don't want to get into real estate, but based on housing prices, you can't make enough money to buy an average house. I mean,
No,
you
and
have,
I and,
you have
and
to
to
be
to
an
I think
executive.
we have to go back to real estate. I would submit that for most Americans, their wealth is their real estate. I mean, it's
Mhm.
their home. It's not,
Exactly.
they're so if we can't help our kids get a house here, that's a serious problem.
Right.
Well, it is a serious problem, and there's a case where my belief is that the reason that this happens is because government has made everything so expensive in terms of development and buying land and taxes, and because we quote don't have enough water, we have to do something to keep development from happening continually. Now you could be on either side of that. We could probably all talk on both sides of that.
Right.
But nonetheless, whatever the government has done has not helped our housing
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
And,
I
and
know, I
think,
think-
I think one of the issues, if you have business experience, you know how to operate a budget. And you know that you only have a limited resources and you have to prioritize how you spend your money. And I think a lot of times right now, the people that are making the laws, they don't understand the budgeting process. And they just think there's all this money is available. And if it's not, they'll just tax people more.
Mhm.
So they want to provide as many benefits as everybody they possibly can. And there's no restraint, there's no control over their spending.
Well, then there's proof in there's proof in the pudding there. We took a look at the legislature, which was going to be horrible in 2020, and they were freaking out. They were going to have a huge deficit, and then they ended up with, I can't remember, 10, 20 billion extra dollars. You know, I mean, so they were really good on their forecasting there. And so, we hire all these great people or all these people at incredible salaries who are supposedly smart, but then they miss that so badly. So then what do? They say, well, look what we can spend this money on. Did they give that money back to us, the people who made it?
No.
No. What they did is they went out and they spent it, and now they're back to sort of a zero budget. If they need more money, they will look for ways to tax us more. And it's a never-ending cycle. So we have just a whole bunch of people who are our legislators who really don't know how to do very much in terms of budgets, business, growth, regulation. They really don't know how to do much. So, I mean, this is I do think that there's, on a far left, there's an agenda here. And we could talk about that, a little bit, I suppose, but for the most part, I think that they just think, oh yeah, let's just go along to get along. And that is the way a union works. That's the way the government works. Go along to get along. You get elevated, you get paid very well. You only work if, you have several months off to do whatever you want. And maybe you campaign, maybe you have parties. You have very liberal restrictions on the money you raise for election. Or not liberal, there are not very many restrictions on that. There are some. But as a result, it's a lifestyle that's not that bad. And when you create a lifestyle that's not a bad lifestyle, people want to go there. I think that's what we have. And the people who have businesses have their own lifestyle. And why would they want to go into government, for crying out loud?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think your premise is well stated, and I think it's very hard to have an appreciation or passing laws that are favorable to small business, because they don't understand how important small business is to the economy, and they also don't understand the premise of running a business, a small business. So if you don't have the understanding and you don't have the experience, how can you actually be pro-business?
Right.
Right. It's just it's not in the cards.
Yeah, they're
Well,
not.
and I think one of the things that's also an issue, they have this belief that all businessmen are rich, etc. But as we all know, the three of us are 80% of the business environment, which are either solopreneurs or people with less than 5 employees. So that is the bulk of business in America. I mean, out of the 3 million businesses, more than 2 million are like us.
Yeah.
And
Well,
they did
and
it for
actually,
reasons that are not necessarily about making a lot of money. Some of them do, but most of us just get by and
So-
are able to pass something on.
And as we mentioned last week, the 70% of manufacturers, just as a sample, because this is something that somewhat affects manufacturers, the legislation, 70% have less than 20 employees. 70%.
Yeah.
So this is a huge, huge number. And if you've got 20 employees, as we all know, you've got 4, maybe 3, maybe 4 people who are in the office, maybe 5, and then you've got everybody else on the floor. You're making stuff. That's what you're there for. You're making things that people want to buy, or that a company wants to buy to make their product. And so a company with 4 or 5 people in the administration, how are they going to deal with this new CO2 accounting law? See, I think this is where the rubber meets the road. First of all, the CO, and as I had mentioned earlier, it applies to anybody doing business in California. And so I'm going to pose a question to you, Ray. You're a billion-dollar business. You are an international business. You're in Florida. You do business all around the world globally. California represents 5% of your business. And because of cost of doing business here, maybe it only represents 2% of your profit. Are you going to pull out of California, or are you going to comply with the new law?
Yeah, I would think, logic tells me that they're going to pull out. It's just not worth it to stay here. So we'll see what happens. We still have, we still have the fourth largest economy in the world. Is that changing? I don't know. I know Germany just, I think, surpassed us, but
Yeah.
but they're struggling too, because basically their entire economy is based on carbon burning engines. And this is gonna be an interesting next 15 years.
Yeah,
I don't know if we're gonna all be here to see it, but our kids sure will be.
yeah, that's right.
Well, I think it kind of raises the next question. I think Ray alluded to this earlier, and that is you gotta realize the state that you're operating in,
Mhm.
and you have to take advantage of whatever their advantages there are in operating in that state. So it isn't going to change, in my opinion. It isn't going to change. It's still going to remain a blue state.
Yeah.
And so if you want to operate in California, you have to learn how to operate within the rules and regulations. Likewise, if you can do so, it's a big advantage over anybody else trying to come in and take away your market share, because they can't do it.
They can't.
Yes.
Well, I think that depends on the industry and what it is. I mean, in this hypothetical company that Ray owns, he's said he's going to not come to he's not going to do business in California. He doesn't have to close anything.
Yeah.
He's selling to retailers, or say he's selling to manufacturers. It's shipped in, people use it, and then they go back. Ray, you're going to have to supply us with all of the CO2 stuff that the state wants, and you're just going, no, I'm not. Sorry, I can't do it. I'm going to lose money if I do it. And what we don't know is that Ray makes purple striped widgets, and those purple striped widgets are the only ones in California. And so now purple striped widgets aren't coming to California anymore. And therefore, all of the 30 or 40 companies that use Ray's purple striped widgets will now have to stop doing production of whatever they're making or that they're selling. They're just not going to be available. It sounds fanciful, but I would say that 10 or 15 times I have bought things from Amazon and they refuse to ship to California. So
Really?
it's not like it doesn't happen now. It does.
Well,
No, I've never heard of, Ron. So
Oh yeah, it mostly has to do with chemicals, like pool supplies.
I thought chemicals. I thought you were buying psilocybin or something like that.
Oh yeah. Well, no. They ship it everywhere but California, and you would
Right,
think
right.
that California would let all those drugs come in,
Yeah.
So it's like consumers are going to have less of a choice in California now, because we're not going to have the availability of a series of products. Who knows what that will be? Is that outrageous, Ed?
that's outrageous, and I totally agree with what you're saying.
No, I mean, is my concept outrageous?
No,
Okay.
it's not outrageous.
Okay.
Yeah, but it is outrageous, though.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
Depending on what side of that question you're on, right?
yeah, that's
And you're not outrageous, but the law is.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
But it still comes down to there are opportunities to operate a successful business in California.
Yep.
True.
Absolutely.
You know how to do it, and you're willing to figure out ways to comply with all these regulations. And other parts of the country, they're going to try to do it from their perspective, their location. They're going to try to ship it in. But that is even becoming more and more difficult, shipping product into California. California is pretty smart. They're figuring out ways that they can tax that commerce. So I really believe that there are opportunities to operate in California, even though it's got very, very difficult standards and compliance issues. but you have to figure it out. And if you're willing to
Yeah.
do it,
Yeah, and I think, Ed, if I don't mean to interrupt you, but
go
I
ahead,
think
go right ahead, please.
the point you made is that, smart entrepreneurs, a new law comes out and they actually say, wow, is that an opportunity? I mean, so, that's one of the things that I think makes California different and obviously makes entrepreneurs who they are. They find opportunities where everybody else just sees more challenges. But that's kind of what gives us the flair that we have, and I think makes America what it is.
Well, I mean, the question is that are we, have we really accomplished anything with all that? I mean, I agree that niches open up. The niche for CO2 carbon accountability is probably exploding right now. There are a whole bunch of environmental biologists and engineers who are already gearing up to figure out, okay, how can we do this? How can we automate part of it? How are we going to be able to do this for this segment or this size business? I mean, they're already ready. Why? Because they're going to be able to get $300, $400, $500 an hour for helping
Yeah.
these businesses get through this mess. And so there's going to be a whole business that's created. The question is how much of a tug does it put on every product? So you decide, okay, well, we are going to do this, and my purple striped widgets are going to have to go up by 30%, 40%, 50% in order to pay for this process. And say that they have to buy them because all these companies, have just basically they only use you. You're a single supplier on that particular thing, and so they have to buy them. And so now what's happened is that it's a component of their product, and so their product goes up, another 4 or 5%. So now we're all paying 4 or 5%. So the question always comes back to, well, if everything goes up 4 or 5%, called inflation, driven by, in this case, driven by regulation. If it goes up that much, what happens to the average person? And as we know, the average person's spendability goes down and their lifestyle goes down. So
I don't
forcing
disagree with
lifestyle to degrade is what I think is
and I think that's a fair assumption. But let's look at it from another perspective that I think Ed was kind of alluding to. We already know that California is kind of the leader in so many things. It's kind of the place where things are started and then moved across the nation. I think this is going to be an example of that. Others, entrepreneurs are going to be able to take advantage by learning how to do it here and then export it elsewhere, not to other states, etc. So it in our minds as small business advocates, it's a real opportunity, even though it's disguised as something that's going to be difficult for the people here in California. Climate change and all the stuff that goes with it is still going to be a predominant influence on markets across the United States.
Well, I agree. The question that I posed is, will it make a difference? We have one of the biggest advocates for the environment, Bill Gates, backing off now, basically saying, well, wait a minute. I didn't mean that we should shut things down.
Yeah.
I didn't mean we should force anything on anybody. The truth of the matter is, as we've already seen, there are riots in France and in other places in Europe because of their power bills. He's come to the conclusion that, and I think this is a relatively close to a quote, that the price is too high to pay for the small difference it will make. This is not a near-term problem. He's changed, it's a long-term problem. We can fix it over the long term with technology. So we've got supposedly one of the smartest men in the world finally realizing what Bjorn Lomborg and 1,200 other scientists who have just signed a letter stating CO2 is simply not the problem. It's cloud cover or something else. So the issue really is much bigger than that. And that is that if we add on hypothetically 6% to, the economy just to do this accounting, that is non-productive. Now, we talked about productivity. Productivity has grown at 1.4%. A 6% hit on that will take us 3.5 years just to break even in productivity alone. So I'm not sure I agree with you. We'll find other things. We can only, a business will find a spot to do business. I'm not saying
Right.
that that's not the case, but to increase our lifestyles, they have to do it efficiently. Lower prices give us more value. This does in no way give you more value unless you think my lifestyle has been increased because we have saved 0.1% over 10 years.
Hmm.
That's what the scientists are saying that we could do. We're going to save that temperature. Well, I'm going, I'll take a 0.1%. Sorry, I don't want my lifestyle to get worse. How about you guys?
If you have so much money, you really don't care. And there are a lot of people in our state that are very wealthy.
I do, yeah.
Yeah. It ain't gonna matter to them.
No.
And they have the biggest influence on the laws of the state, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah.
The people that get hurt are the people at the lower end of the scale.
Right. And it's always been that way.
Yeah.
You know,
and you're right, Ron. A lot of these things that you're talking about are very true. It's just going to raise prices of everything for folks like that to having a hard time getting by every day. It's going to cost them more. Yeah, I think your point. It's a very good point.
60% of the people, maybe 70, are going to feel the pinch every day in their gas bill, the price of milk.
their food.
They're going to feel it in a very, very real way.
Yeah.
And so then, but that's okay. In this country, most of them will do fine. But in other countries, it's going to mean that they can't eat, enough to live now. That's
I
that's,
think
that's the other side of it.
I think we already have that problem. You know, the rate of difficulty for poor people to even buy food has increased dramatically, and child welfare is really being adversely impacted. And of course, all the things you're talking about, Ron, are added to that. I mean, what we've discussed here clearly doesn't only impact the wealthy; it also impacts the people who are at the bottom end of the spectrum.
Well, what you're saying is not entirely true. I mean, I know that that's common in media a lot, that people getting worse, et cetera, et cetera. But there are plenty of facts, and I wrote a full paper on this for Fortnightly. In fact, the amount of people who are really destitute and poor around the world has dropped precipitously in the last 20 or 30 years until COVID. Now, in the last 3 years, yes, things are all mixed up. We're going through some sort of a change.
That's all I'm saying. I'm referring to near future, and a lot of it due to COVID.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And so then but the issue is that really, I mean, are we just going to sort of turn our back on them and say, for that 10th degree, for that half degree of lower average temperature, is that what we want to do? Is we want to put many hundreds of millions of people in extreme duress? That's the alternative here, because without increased productivity, we can't afford to be able to help them.
Well, it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, it definitely is a challenge.
But
and there's only so much we can do, the three of us.
Yeah.
So
I'm not suggesting we're going to fix this.
And we have to advise our clients to be able to operate in the state of California. And if you think you're going to circumvent the rules and regulations, it's only a short-term opportunity, because long-term you're going to lose.
Yeah, exactly.
So
well, assuming that they're able to enforce it. I mean, the way I have read this bill so far is it is so complicated that the legislators themselves don't have any idea how it's going to work.
Well, I think going back to your chart, it's obvious to see as you look at that chart about what their backgrounds are. They clearly don't know either. I mean, basically, people are not elected because of their knowledge. They're elected because of somehow they gain enough trust among the people that are voting for them. But as to what they know. I mean, it's
Oh,
clear
yeah,
they don't know a lot.
Yeah, it's a sad situation. The electorate, those folks voting, making these decisions are really uninformed. So we're going to get what we deserve,
Right.
and I guess you could actually say we're getting what we deserve because we're not sending people with experience and common sense to our legislatures really anywhere. I mean, at the local
Right.
level, all the way to the national level, we're not sending good, solid people. And as a result, we're having there are a lot of really bad decisions going on at the government level. And
Yeah, watching the chaos in the House recently, I can't help but agree with you. And so
yeah,
this is one of the challenges of democracy. You want democracy? Well, this is what you get.
That's well said.
yeah, yeah. That's
I-
another subject that we might explore that.
I
Right.
think, our a lot of our grandparents and great grandparents, when they came to this country, they were at the bottom of the
Oh yeah.
process of the scale,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
So they had to worry about the first basic need for food.
Yeah.
Most of us right now, that's not even on our list, right?
no,
Yeah.
even our poor population is
Yeah. Just out of curiosity, have any one of us ever been hungry? I mean, to the point where we haven't eaten for 3 or 4 days.
No.
no, no.
That's
Yeah,
what I
no.
get back to this, Ray. I see some I've seen this in my life because I started at the bottom and I've seen people make fun of people that are eating certain things. And I
Right.
think to myself, I say, if you didn't eat for 3 days,
You would eat it
the
too.
first one in that, in trying to eat that food because you had no other choices.
Yeah,
Yeah. No, I remember my brother saying, this is after World War II, that he got very good at figuring out when he was eating food. If it had green mold, he would avoid it. If it had white mold, he knew it was okay to eat.
Yeah.
yeah. That was post-war in Germany, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Well, it was very tough, and I think we've all been through that. I went to a few years ago. I went back to the place in Kentucky where my great grandfather had to put together a lean-to and squat on somebody else's property in order to be able to feed his family.
Yeah.
And he hired himself as a laborer, and it took him many years before he could get his own property. There's nothing there. The only reason I was able to find it is that they named the creek after him, and so there is a Burgess branch of the something Creek, and there it is, right there, little teeny creek that flowed pretty continually. So that's where they had to live for like 8 or 12 years.
Yeah.
On somebody
Yeah.
else's property as squatters in order to try and get started and reestablish the family after they had become completely and totally destitute and raised as in servitude. So, my family understands that. We all understand that. We've always had an opportunity, and I think that the question here is that in those days, it wasn't the government that kept us down. The government said, go out and get a piece of land and do something on your own.
Right. And they gave it to you.
That's right.
I'm not sure that's where we are or where we're going today. That's the sad part.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, guys, I know I have something else I got to get to. I think there's still a lot more to talk about in terms of the legislative side. So I don't know if you guys are open to this, but I think it's worth, continuing this conversation.
Unfortunately, we could probably spend every single week talking about this kind of thing as
Yes. Well,
because
that's
remember,
true.
there were 2,700 bills that were brought forward, and we couldn't even keep up. You see, so, I mean, there's the level of magnitude. It's clearly out of
Yeah, that's
our
right.
hand. So,
Right.
hey, great. Thank you so much.
Nice
Yeah,
job,
thank you,
Ron. You
guys.
did a great job of laying that out. Excellent.
You bet.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, guys. You have a good weekend.